Hey ladies, got a struggle? Need to vent? It's time to join your voice and get down to business with some critical thought, where like-minded ladies share their personal experiences to empower each other, using critical thinking to make wise decisions. And now, here's your host, Lady C.
Hi, this is Lady C. Thank you for tuning in to part 2 of the Susan Gaskin story, where she will continue to discuss her struggles as a Jehovah's Witness woman and how things progressed in her relationship with her husband.
Well, I should just add that he was the kind of person who had a really, really low self-esteem, and it was due to the way he was raised. And so his way of trying to get me to how do I say this, to love him, I guess, in whatever way he wanted, I don't know, was to try to manipulate me and to be cruel. He actually felt that by bringing me down to like zero and making me feel bad about myself would make me somehow want to feel like he's my savior. He's the person I need to stick to. And if I could give any advice to men, I mean, not that I'm an expert or anything, but the one thing I would say for men is if you love the woman you're with, make her feel loved and make her feel wanted and make her feel that she's the best person in your life. My husband made me feel like I was the worst person in the world and the worst person in his life, and somehow as if that would, as an abusive way of treating me, so somehow I would want to do more for him, as if I'm just a crappy person, I better glom onto him. And in fact, it had the opposite effect. Had he praised me and had made me feel special to him, I would have loved him and would have wanted to be with him. Instead, what ended up happening is, I stayed with him for 10 years. I never thought I would ever leave him. I didn't think I could. It didn't even occur to me to leave him. Again, the end is going to come, so it wasn't an option. But what ended up happening to me was I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in the late 90s, and while I was pioneering, and I was having a hard time. Because that's the one thing about being a Jehovah's Witness is you have to do a lot of walking. There is a lot of walking. Yes, you could do telephone witnessing, and I did that too. And I had a lot of Bible study, so you're doing a lot of sitting there. But still, there's a lot of preaching and going up and down people's driveways, and that was becoming harder and harder for me. And so I was having an attack of multiple sclerosis, and I was working half time for the government still to support us, and I took a break from everything. I just kind of unplugged. And I think for the first time in my life I felt down. I don't want to say depressed, but I definitely felt down, just down about everything, because I felt like I actually did enjoy pioneering, and I felt like I'd have to give that up, and I felt like kind of a failure, and I felt out of control, like, when your body's doing things and you can't control it. It's really frustrating. So I didn't go to any meetings for a bit there, and I started goofing around on the internet. And I was trying to learn French. I was always interested in that. I was trying to learn different instruments, and it was, long story short, I ended up meeting someone on the internet. And that's where things kind of, happened for me.
Wow, so you met someone on the internet. Wow. What was that like?
It became, we were flirting back and forth, and it wasn't good. I to be honest, it's a way, I don't even know what to say about what my state of mind was at that time, except to say that I really don't know what was happening. I just for the first time in my life, I just allowed myself to just go. And, I guess after being with somebody, my husband and I had been together 10 years married, but together before that for a good year and a half before we got married. So, 10 years of being beaten down by somebody that, and I don't want to blame him. I'm just saying that I had experienced no love. This is a man who, if we were in our own home, he wouldn't hug me. He had this expression, if you play around, you got to lay around. Okay, so in other words, if I touch him in any, soft, gentle way, we had to go, be intimate completely. It's like there was no amount of intimacy with him that you're allowed to do without going full bore, He said, our neighbors can see us. I go, who cares? We're married. This is our home. I can't even kiss you in our own home, and his nickname for me was Lardass. And I'm a very tall, slim person. I've never been overweight a day in my life. So this was his nickname for me. I guess he thought it was funny, but that's what he called me, lard ass. Lard ass, get me a cup of coffee. Lard ass, make breakfast. Lard ass, you know. When I think about it now, it's insane. But this is the kind of thing that he would do. He was just very cruel and very demanding. And anyways, 10 years of being with someone like that never ever made you feel good about yourself, never bought me presents, never nothing, just crap for 10 years. And now I'm on the internet and I've got this guy saying how beautiful I am and how lovely I am and how funny I am. And, you know, it just kind of, and what's really interesting is that he had some friends that said to him, be nice to your wife. Like, you've got a good wife. I did all the cooking, the cleaning. I never complained. I paid the bills. I took the garbage out, did the lawn. I did everything. He did nothing around the house.
Oh, my God, you're kidding. You mean he didn't even care for the lawn?
I'm not joking. I did everything around the house. He did nothing. I mean, people would come from service. I mean, sometimes people would say, oh, can we just stop by at your house, you know, while we were in service? I got to go to the bathroom. And I go, sure. It's like 11 o'clock in the morning. He's still in bed, sleeping. You know, not working, just sleeping.
Well, how about his parents? Did the father help out, or did the mother do everything in the home?
Oh, yeah, the mother did everything, for sure. You know, I mean, he did work. Don't get me wrong. He did work a couple of days a week, but his idea was he could work for 2 days a week, and the rest of the week he would play video games, watch pornography, and do whatever you do when you watch pornography, and sleep in. So he would sleep in till like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and the other witnesses were shocked. I mean, they'd come to my house to use the bathroom, and they'd be like, oh, he's still in bed, you know, like weird. Yeah, there was a lot of issues there. So I think, so I met this guy on the internet, and his, sorry, I just want to say, his own friends would say, be nice to your wife, or the first guy that treats her well, she's going to leave you. And funny enough, that's exactly what happened. Because so I met this guy on the internet. I didn't plan anything with him. I didn't, you know, I flirted back. I definitely said things I shouldn't have said. I'm not proud of that. I'm going to be honest. I can't blame it all on my ex. It was wrong, and I knew it was wrong. But I didn't care. For some reason, I didn't care. It was the weirdest thing. And I have no explanation for what was going on.
But, you know, Susan, you keep saying that you don't want to blame your ex-husband, but he has to share some of this blame as well, because no one deserves to be treated that way. And naturally, people are going to gravitate to someone that knows how to treat them and treats them better than what he was treating you.
Yeah. I like to take responsibility for myself, I guess. I don't like to blame others. I like to think that I have, but you're right. I know what you're saying. You're right. And that is how I feel. But I guess part of me feels that I wish I had the strength to tell him to go away, you know, and to just leave me alone. But the problem is that I was in an organization that doesn't allow for that. And as you pointed out earlier, the woman is always made to feel that she has to save him, that she has to help him, and that if things aren't working out, somehow she is to blame. Mm-hmm. So there was that mentality that I didn't even see it as an option that I could tell him to get out, you know?
And that's why I want everyone that is tuning into our program to realize that they don't have to stay in an abusive relationship, and God is not going to punish you for leaving, because no one has to stay in a relationship like that, whether it's physical abuse or verbal abuse.
Right. No, I agree 100%. It's just that I'm just trying to think of where I was at mentally at that time. But now I can clearly see. I mean, that was insanity. The whole thing was just crazy. You know, to think that I'd still be with him if I didn't wake up. And what ended up happening was he discovered, I was the type of person that always apologized for things that happened, because I just wanted to keep the peace in the marriage. No matter what happened, I always apologized. Well, we actually went on a trip with another couple to another city for a weekend. And on that trip, he said something really cruel to me about, I can't remember what it was exactly, and I don't want to say it. I kind of remember a little bit, but it was very, very cruel. And I was mad, but I wasn't one to fight in front of other people. So I said to myself, next time I'm alone with him, I'm going to let him have it. So I did. I stood up for myself, and I said to him, that was awful what you said. I want you to apologize. And he wouldn't. He thought it was funny. He just laughed and thought it was funny. And I said, okay, fine, you know. So then I just went about my business. And when I got home, he was sleeping in the basement. He'd moved everything into the basement for him. And I thought, great, because I'd met this guy online and I was having a great time chatting it up with him while my crappy husband is in the basement. Yeah, so then he actually went around the house, and any picture of me, he turned it upside down, like around, so he didn't have to look at it. And I guess and this went on for 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I got really close to this guy. Like I said, I never planned to be with him, but, I was chatting him up. I loved being with this guy. I thought he was something, And my ex, so one day after 2 weeks, I was at my office, working because I still worked half-time, and the receptionist called me up and said, your husband's here. And she said it in a way that was kind of weird. And he was there, and he'd walked for hours to get downtown because he found out about what was going on online. And he put a spy program on the computer. I guess what happened was I didn't go down to apologize to him. For the first time in my life, I didn't apologize to him. And he thought that something's going on. So he put a spy program on the computer and found out what I was doing. I met this guy. And he was in tears, and he was going to kill himself. And it was this big and I sat there listening to him, and I didn't care. I remember looking at him going, oh, well. So anyways, he said he'd already contacted the elders. He told about 10 people. He called basically everybody under the sun and told them about this. And now the elders wanted to meet with me. And that's when I had all my, I don't know, do you want me to talk about what happened after that?
Yes, absolutely.
So the elders contacted me, and they wanted, first, they have this preliminary meeting to see if they have enough on you to have a judicial committee, and they felt they did. So we had 3 judicial committees after that. The thing that's weird is these are the same elders that I had gone to at least on 2 other occasions to see if they could help me with my marriage and with my ex, my husband at the time. Is there anything they could do to help me? I'm having a hard time. Oh, yes, we'll be there. Never showed up, never helped at all. And whatever, granted, I know they're busy, but what bothered me is when I asked for help, they were nowhere to be seen. But now when it's time to judge me and punish me and hear what's going on, the bad stuff, they were there 3 times in 1 week. And I even said to them between judicial committees, I said, can I, because they never knew what to do with me. At the end of every judicial committee, they'd go off into a room and leave me sitting there, and, while they're making their decision, and they'd come out and say, we have to meet with you again. We don't know what to do with you. And then they'd say, we got to meet with you again tomorrow. And I'd say, okay. And they give me a whole bunch of stuff to read. This bound volume, read this article, that article, and, whatever. And I read everything. I came back for the second meeting. Same thing happened. There's a long 2 hours of yakking. They go off to a room to make their decision, come back. We don't know what to do with you. And they said one time, they came out, they go, what do you want us to do with you? And I said, I'd like you to show me mercy, And I said, and I'd like a bit of time between meetings, because I don't even know like I said before, I don't know what was going on in my head. I'm just allowing myself to do stuff for the first time in my life. And they said, are you willing to go to counseling, marriage counseling? And I said, yes. And then they said, are you, but what I think what did it for me was the third meeting that we had was very brief. They basically just asked me, did you talk to this guy in between meetings? And I said, yes, I had. I mean, I didn't contact him, but he contacted me, and I talked to him. And they said, if he came to town, because this guy lived on the other side of the country, if this guy had come to town, would you meet him? And I said, of course. Because I thought, someone's come 3,000 miles away to see me. Yes, I'm going to say hi at least. Yes. They didn't like that. And they didn't like the fact that everyone seemed to know about this. But, they said, too many people know about this. And I said, well, that's not my fault. I haven't told a soul. But they really didn't like that people knew about it. And I think the final nail in my coffin was if they said, we completely agree that you don't need to be with your husband anymore. They called him a dud. They said, oh, he is a dud for sure. That's their words. And but they said, you have to remain single. And when I said, well, I can't promise that. I can't promise. I'm 30 years old. I can't promise I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. And they didn't like that either. So then they said, we have to go make our decision. And they came out and they just said, you're disfellowshipped.
Oh, wow.
And and you know what I did? This is what bugs me. So they go, you're disfellowshipped. You're free to go. And I looked at the floor, and then I looked up at them, and I was, crying. And like just tears. I wasn't like hysterical. I just had a couple of tears in my eyes. And I just said, I'm sorry. And then I just got up and walked out. And I was really surprised. But I was surprised and I was upset, and but I don't know, I guess I kind of felt liberated at the same time. I felt like, okay, right away I felt like, okay, the silver lining to this cloud is I'm just going to meet this guy now. I'm done with my husband. Now I've got the excuse to just, that's it, I'm out of here. And my goal was just live my life and then go back to the organization. Within like a year or two, I'll be back,
Okay.
But the most interesting thing that I find about this story is the fact that you never even met the guy in person.
No, and we had no plans to meet either. It's not like we devised up some, concocted plan where we're supposed to meet like in a week or something. There was nothing of the sort.
He was like your online therapist, somebody to help you get through the day, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing, though. So what happened after that?
Well, this is so funny. Okay, so here's a husband that rarely would go to meetings, certainly didn't go to service or wasn't commenting, nothing like that. Suddenly now he's crying. He's going to everyone. He's writing people. He wrote letters to some of my friends to say, do your best to bring her back to me. And he went to my parents, who, by the way, he didn't like my parents. I don't know why he didn't like them, because they were always really good to him. In fact, the house we lived in, they didn't live in the house, but it was a house they owned. They owned another house, and we lived in that. And they gave us great rent as a result of, our relationship. I mean, they did everything good for him, but he didn't like them. And so here he is now crying his eyes out to my mom and dad, I want her back, and he's threatening suicide. It was ridiculous. I drove to my parents' house. My first stop outside of being disfellowship was to drive to my parents' house and tell them what happened. The thing is, everyone knew I had a crappy husband. Everyone knew I had a hard time with him, but I never complained about my marriage to them. They just figured I could take it, and I figured I could take it too, because I never felt it was right to slam your husband to anybody else. People just thought, oh, Susan's okay, she'll deal with it, she'll figure it out. Well, when I went to my parents' house and told them I'm disfellowship, they were floored. They couldn't believe it. And they were both, my dad was an elder at the time and in my congregation, and my mom was very strong in the organization, and they couldn't believe it. But my dad went and got a pad of paper. He wrote down, he says, okay, we're not ever going to shun you. That's the first thing he said.
Well, that was good.
He goes to my mom, are we? She goes, no, we're not. My mom just goes, as long as we don't talk about religion. And I said, great, because I'm thinking that's the last thing I want to talk about right now is religion. And then he wrote out all the reasons why this happened. Your husband was crappy. You had bad health. I was trying all these new things to try to help me with my health. Like I was doing a bit of fasting, hoping that would help. And he said, your mind isn't thinking clearly because you've been fasting. My dad basically found every excuse under the sun to defend me. It was really cute, actually. But so that happened, and on the other side, my ex, he decided he was going to go to all the meetings now. And my mom said it was so disgusting, because she said he'd go up and he'd be holding all the babies, and oh, poor me, and everyone. I was painted now as this villain, this horrible girl. So the story was, I met a guy on the internet and I left my husband for him. That's the story. And for him, poor him. Oh, he loves his wife so much,
Yeah, and especially after all the stuff he was doing to you, making you feel bad, calling you a lard ass, and now all of a sudden he's the victim?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Because in the organization, when a marriage breaks up, there's always the bad mate and the good mate, the innocent mate and the bad mate. And now I'm the bad mate. What one of my friends said to me, she said, when you give your marriage vows, there's more to it than that, and part of it is looking after your mate and being a good person to them, something he never did,
Right.
But there's more to it than just simply breaking the moral laws. There's something about being respectful and loving to your wife, and that's something my husband never was to me. So anyways, the whole thing broke up, and now I'm in a position where I didn't really know what to do, where to go, because I didn't want to live with him anymore, and I didn't even know where to live, even though the house think about how crazy I was. The house we lived in, like I said, was owned by my parents, and yet I knew that I couldn't afford the rent by myself. And my parents said they could let me stay there with a reduced rent, but I felt bad for them, so I felt like I needed to find a new place to live. And my coworkers at work, who are worldly people, they found out what had happened to me only because I guess I started acting well, I guess I must have acted differently. I didn't tell a soul what had happened because I was afraid that people would be, everyone at work knew I was a witness. And I was afraid it would look bad for the organization. So I didn't tell a soul. But one of the girls who I was always a little bit close to said to me, you don't seem the same. Something has happened to you. What's going on, And I finally went out for coffee with her and broke down and told her that what had happened. And, Of course, and she ended up telling all my coworkers, too. And they were so supportive. I mean, these are, worldly people that I'd always, kept away from me. They were like, come. I had so many offers of people to say, come and live with me. Please come and stay with me. And they were just so amazing. And and believe me, it was a terrible witness for the organization because some of them just couldn't believe that. They're like, you mean they're not talking to you now? Like they're shunning you? I mean, there was that. There was all that to deal with too, the whole shunning thing. And the one thing I do want to add is I had a lot of friends within the organization, and I thought they were like great friends of mine. Well, I was prepared for the shunning when I got disfellowshipped. What I wasn't prepared for was the nastiness. I mean, my best friend at the time, she's not the best friend I talked about earlier from my childhood. That girl ended up moving out far, far away and marrying a guy. But I ended up being friends with another girl, and we got really close. She had ended her marriage because she had a crappy husband. He actually happened to be one of my ex's best friends. They grew up together. She ditched him. I supported her throughout the whole thing. She never got disfellowship, mind you, but I supported her throughout the whole thing. She ended up marrying again, and she eloped with a guy who was studying. I supported her through that, even though I was quite hurt when she called me up one day and said, "Hi, I'm married." I felt like, what? You didn't tell me? Like I thought we were good friends, But when I want to get divorced, she actually went to the police about me. What ended up happening was my ex started stalking me, and he, as I told you, he came from a really bad family, and one of his brothers, they were really mean. Like I said, the one guy had killed somebody, and they were rough guys. These guys are like 6'4", 220 pounds, big, muscular, strong bullies is what they were. They were like the Nephilim. And I'm serious, like they are like half demons and really, really rough characters. And one of them saw my brother somewhere and he threatened him, because what ended up happening is I ended up moving in with my brother and his wife. Because my brother had lived with me at one time when he was single and looking for a place to live. So I had him live with us. And now my brother felt like, I want to return the favor. I want to be there for my sister. So he said, come and live with us, with him and his wife. And they ran into my brother somewhere, and he threatened to beat my brother up. Ooh. And I said, that's enough. I want to say I had a website too. That was when I was a witness. It was just a goofy website. There was a link to the Watchtower. They didn't. It wasn't JW.org at the time, but they did have something online at the time. I don't remember. And so I had a link to their website, and I just had goofy pictures of me doing silly things and just goofy things I downloaded, like goofy songs and stuff, and pictures of all my friends and just things like that. It was just a goofy website. He took that website and he turned it into making me look like a whore. He took pictures of porno pictures, and blotted them out a bit. So and he put my face on them as if it was me.
Oh no!
And he says, look at my wife, the whore. And he says, and then he took he had where I had my friends. He says they never want to be her friend again. She's such a bitch. And he just said these horrible things about me. And like I said, he was stalking me, because everywhere I went, he seemed to know where I was, and I people would always say, oh, I see him. He's always following you around and stuff. And so I called the police, and I said, this guy's stalking me. His brothers are threatening my brothers. Is there anything I can do about it? And they said, yes. They took it very seriously. And they ended up calling him up, and the police went and visited him. Sorry, they paid a visit to him, and the guy says, I really scared him. He says, I don't think he'll bother you again. But if he does, you're welcome to fill out a form and get a restraining order. But when I did that, this girl, who was my best friend, or was, decided that she's going to call the police on me. Of course, they never called me, because why are you calling the police on me? I haven't done anything, But I guess I was shocked at the extent to, hearing the slander that people said about me got back to me, because, as I said, my parents were in that same congregation where I got disfellowship. So I was able to hear the nastiness that was said from my so-called friends. That's what I wasn't prepared for. I was really, really shocked because I was always good to people, always gave them my best. And now that suddenly I was painted as this whore,
Wow. You really went through a tough time in the organization, and that's just pretty bad. But you know what? Can we step back a second about your brother and his wife? I want our listening audience to know what their status was in the organization at the time they allowed you to move in with them. So can you give us a little bit of background about your brother and his wife?
I loved my brother. We were always very, very close. I always looked up to him. He was just a few years older than me. And he was always very funny and very, very, very intelligent. And like academically intelligent, I mean. And he never really bought into the organization. He tried to. And he worked for the government, and he worked nearby me, and we'd go for lunch sometimes. And he said to me, one time he said to me, "You look so happy as a pioneer." He goes, "I pray to Jehovah, and I just don't feel anyone's listening to me. I never feel he's listening." And I tried to help him, right? Because I was really into the organization. But he never bought into it. He said he'd give talks, and he said he started feeling more and more, like he was a ministerial servant. He said he started feeling more and more that the midweek meetings were just sales pitches, like any company, like any company you go to, they've got their sales pitches. And he says, I didn't feel right about it. And he says, I never would encourage people to go in service because he says it just seemed like, it didn't seem right. He just didn't buy into it. So when I got this fellowship, and he and his wife weren't going to meetings that often anymore. They were more and more feeling like this isn't the truth, And when I got this fellowship, I think that was the final straw for him because he had me live with him. He said, "Come and live with my wife and I." And one of the elders in my brother's congregation went to visit them. And I was there at the time. Like I happened to be there when they popped by. And the one elder said to my brother, he goes, "I have a brother who's disfellowshipped, and I haven't spoken to him for 15 years. I guess the guy had been disfellowshipped for smoking." Mm-hmm. And my brother goes, that was the final straw. My brother's like, "What?" He goes, "You haven't spoken to your brother in 15 years. He goes, "That is sad. That is really sick." And he said, "Look, my sister has health problems. My sister had a bad, crappy marriage." He goes, "I'm going to be there to support her," because they were trying to get them to kick me out. And my brother asked them to leave. He says, "You know what? You can leave." So that was the final straw for them. They were like, "What a ridiculous organization. Like, you're not even there to help my sister. What have you done to help her? You're just telling me to kick her out? Really?"
See, the thing is, the people on your job that were considered quote-unquote worldly people, that you don't want to be around these people, when you ended up in a bad situation, they were there to help you pick up the pieces, get yourself together, and yet the witnesses were trying to kick you out on the street, you know? So was your brother disciplined for letting you stay?
Oh, he didn't. No, they were never disciplined. They, it was a strange situation. They managed to fade. And they've still faded. I mean, my brother doesn't. He's told me, like, when I got disfellowshipped, I went through various phases of anger to hurt to I started reading the Ray Franz books, and I really woke up like much more so, And then I would tell my brother, I go, "Oh, this and that," and I started going through this kind of an angry phase because I was so shocked at the things I'd learned about the organization. And my brother said to me, "Oh, Sue," he goes, just let it go. Like, he doesn't care. But the difference between my brother and I is that I bought into it totally. I was fully indoctrinated. My brother never really did buy into it. And I think that makes a huge difference when you're coming out of it. It's like being in love with someone and being hurt when they betray you, and being with someone that you never really cared for, and now they're gone. It's like, oh, well, good, one less loser in my life,
This is Lady C. Thank you for tuning in to part 2 of the Susan Gaskin story. We welcome you to tune in to part 3 as Susan continues to tell you about her struggles as a Jehovah's Witness woman.
If you've been in the struggle and want to appear as a guest on our show, email us at exjwct@gmail.com. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of critical thinkers.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.